I get all this crazy dentistry, you know, teeth yanked out and retainers and braces for years to have my teeth growing crooked and braces again.
In around 50% of people wake up with a dry mouth. It changes bacteria, it changes the microbiome in the mouth. Actually, I can't get my head around it. How on earth have dentists missed this?
Really feels like I was living two different lives.
What's the single best thing that it did for you?
I mean, what doesn't it do for me?
James, Nestor, we have finally met. It's been a few years. We've spoken on the phone. We've had emails and a lot of correspondence over the years, but we've never met face to face. We came close. I was in LA and that didn't happen. So yeah, it's great to meet you.
Great to meet you. I'm happy we're finally here, face to face.
I think it's going to be interesting. I didn't really want to go down the kind of the route that most people will ask questions about Brett. You know, we will dig in and out of it, and of course that's the book that we're talking about.
What else are we going to talk about, Patrick?
Well,
I mean, that's the only thing to talk about.
I want to get an insight into the stuff that maybe you may not feel most comfortable talking about.
Great.
So we'll see where this one goes. But anyway, if anybody's into breathing, I think this is going to be unmissable.
We'll see what happens.
A huge journey. You knew, you know, in terms of your background in writing the book, it was a long journey. I have to say, I reread the book just recently in the last couple of weeks and just in preparation for this. And as any budding writer, you know, anybody who wants to put a book together, it's amazing how you were able to kind of weave the narrative. You started off with a story, you were able to bring in the science back into the story, back into the science, and almost you had a story going from start to finish, and interwoven was science, but kept in a usable way. I'd love to get some of your thinking on that one. I know it's a kind of a question that's probably nobody has asked you. You know, how did you plan it? Did you plan it with the story and bring in the science? Like, because I know looking at a manuscript and standing back, it's not easy because it just seems... You've got, what's that, 60,000 words in that book? I'm not sure, but...
About
so 90,000 words.
Yeah. So I think you start off with a plan. I had a very clear plan. In nonfiction, you sell your book on that plan, right? So you have to chart out exactly what the chapters are going to be, who you're going to talk to, what you're going to do. And I thought I had that all figured out. So that's how I was able to sell that proposal. And the way that nonfiction goes is you sell the proposal, they give you just a little bit of money, just enough to barely almost get by so that you deliver and then you get the rest of it. And I went out into the field for a number of years and figured out my proposal was completely wrong. I was not approaching this story the right way. I had to rewrite the entire thing. I lost probably 2 years of research and writing and travel expenses from that because I didn't understand properly how humans had lost the ability to breathe, like really, like lost the ability to breathe functionally, because that story was so many levels deep, and I was just going 3 levels deep. It was actually 10 levels deep, and that's how it is in my job. You think you're going to be able to find everything online on different pages of information. You think you're going to be able to do it nowadays with AI, but you cannot. You have to go out and talk to people and spend years and years and years in the field before you really start to discover where the truth behind the truth is. And that was the thing that pivoted the book in a big way. It cost me a lot of time, cost me a lot of energy. And, you know, in the end, I think it was a more important story to tell.
Oh, for sure. Like, you can see it in the quality of the book itself. And it's always that thing, even though you had some part of the advance up front, there's always a risk. You could have put in a lot of time. The book might have sold 5,000 copies. It turned out to have sold, I don't know, several million copies. So it paid off. Did you even consider that end of it? Did you ever consider the amount of time that goes into writing a book? And like, I can vouch for it from my own point of view. Like, I was just writing a book recently and I've shelved it and not to touch it because, you know, I just felt life got in the way. There's so much going on. My work is so busy, and then trying to do a book, and I couldn't do it justice, give it the time. So I shelved it. Now, whether that resurfaces or not is a different story. Did that come into your mind?
It did, actually, because I had a book come out before this, and so I was somewhat versed in the way that these things went. And in that book, I also saw what happens when a book does not perform the way it should. My previous book won some awards, I got some attention, I got good reviews and all of that, but it wasn't able to sell in the volume that the publisher demanded. And they basically just cut me off. It's crazy. You think you have these strong friendships with these people that you work with over years and years. You ask about their family, you ask about Christmas, and then you realize how superficial so many of those relationships actually are. And that is something that I feel so naive saying this and hearing myself say this. But that's a lesson I had to learn, that a lot of these relationships in business are transactional. And the moment where you cannot deliver something of great value to someone else, you're disposable. And that's not the world that I was reared in, and that's not the world that I'm comfortable being in. But it was a learning experience for me. I licked my wounds, and over a couple of years after that book came out, I didn't think I was going to write another book. It was just so much work. It was precarious. The payoff at the end was not something that I could sustain myself with. So I was doing other jobs at the time. And I was just like, well, I tried that publishing thing, and it didn't work out. I mean, it worked out in some ways. That the book performed, way better than other books would, but not to the publisher's expectation. I think that's the key, the publisher's expectation. So this book came about just because having my life without something to constantly think about felt very vacant for me. I like having something spinning in the background, and that's how this book came about. I never thought it was actually going to become a book. I thought it was going to become an article. Then I gave it to my agent, and we realized, maybe there's a book in here. But to answer your question, no one had any idea what was going to happen when this book was released, which was right in the middle of the pandemic, like right at the beginning of lockdown. No one had any clue, and I was hoping it would do the same way that my previous book did, which was like moderate, modest, but enough to get by.
I read the pre-publication. I don't know, was it your publisher or you sent it on to me? And I think it was actually printed off on A4 sheets of paper. But I kind of got a sense, I said, there's something in this. This is a book like no other. And that's when I was asked then to write a testimonial. I said, literally, this is the book to read on Brett. There's so much covered in it. Like, it's almost that, I suppose, somebody uneducated or not knowing about the Brett, when they come across the book, it's an amazing topic. And were you surprised, in terms of the application of this modality of health, which literally gets very little attention? Now it's getting some attention. It's a hot topic, but it's been kind of ignored. It's been overlooked. And it's got an amazing kind of inroad into all fields of health and medicine. Like, we're covering dentistry, we're covering mental health, we're covering respiratory health, we're covering physical movement and fitness. There's so much going on with it, and it's just about the breadth. Were you surprised?
I was surprised because so many of the books that I read on this subject were actually good. Like, they had the science there. And so when people say, like, oh, this is an interesting hypothesis that you posited here, it's not a hypothesis. These are scientific facts, and all the references are in the back of the book. So in regards to people finding interest in the subject, it was really shocking to me because breathwork has been around for a while, but the book isn't about breathwork. And that's what I think a lot of breathworkers may be a little disappointed when they
I don't know if I'd agree with you. I think the book is absolutely about... Well, I don't like the word breathwork anyway,
okay,
James.
Okay, all right.
Who came up with that word, breathwork? Honestly, breathing training, breathing re-education, breathing as a tool for self-empowerment.
I think people more interested in yoga-inspired or yoga-derived breathing techniques assume the book is about, it's all about different practice. Do this practice, do that practice. And that a lot of that is easy. I can tell you right now, you're the last person on the planet I can tell how to breathe better. But you can pick someone off the street in 15 seconds, 30 seconds. If they actually follow it, breathe through your nose, breathe into your belly, right? Don't overbreathe. Be sure you're breathing through your nose at night. Like, how long did that take? 12 seconds? That will absolutely change someone's life. But unless they understand why, and unless they understand how that affects your body, it's not going to stick. Like, I think of all of these podcasts now, you get on Instagram, everyone's throwing out these little nuggets on how to get better. Oh, take this supplement, take that supplement. But it's just sort of in one ear and out the other. So my job I'm not a breath worker, right? I'm new to this field, but I'm a journalist. I've been doing that for quite a long time, is to interpret this stuff from an outsider's view and to then spit back out the stuff that I found to have most resonance with me. And I did not think it would resonate with people as well as it did with me, because it absolutely changed my life, these simple tricks. And that's what got me so angry about this. Like, why didn't I hear about this from my family physician? Why didn't I hear about it from a school teacher? These are easy, quick and easy things. Why did I get all this crazy dentistry, teeth yanked out and retainers, headgear and braces for years to have my teeth growing crooked and braces again? It's just, when you look at that, it's so crazy that people are not even given rudimentary information on how to improve their health and to allow their kids to grow up and not have braces and not live with the things that I don't know if you had those things, but I certainly did. And I think that is what inspired me to want to keep pushing into this and spread that word.
So you asked about the why. Why didn't you hear about it? Why didn't your medical doctor tell you about it? Mm-hmm. And why do you think?
I think that a lot of the stuff was viewed as flaky, as new agey for a long time. People associate breathing better, a basic biological function, with, crystals and sitting in a corner with a robe, which is so unfortunate, because I can't imagine anything more essential to life than breathing better. So I think that's part of it. And also, like, doctors just don't have time. There are many doctors in my family, right? You've seen 15 patients an hour, and you have enough time to quickly assess them and make sure they don't die. But you're not really ensuring that they can live a better life. And so what I've done, speaking with so many doctors and speaking at a lot of conferences, is to explain to them, you don't have to teach them these methods. You have to give them a little bit of information and be like, hey, your kid's 8 years old. Your kid has asthma. Asthma is really bad. Now I'm going to give you oral steroids. I'm going to give you a bronchodilator, and this will help them from not collapsing, But this is not going to cure the problem. There's this other road which you should go investigate, and it's learning how to control your breathing so you can control the symptoms of asthma. That doesn't take that long to communicate to someone. So coming back to your question, why? I think some of it is time. I think that the other part is willing ignorance towards these things. I think that, and the other one is really bad marketing from the breath work or breath technique community.
Yeah, I'd agree. I actually think the breathing industry hasn't helped itself.
No.
It's made it so woo-woo, so left of field, and even the language that's communicated. And that was one of I've made a living out of teaching breathing for 25 years. And, it's been a wonderful way of life, and it's been very, very rewarding. It's been amazing. But I've come across resistance just as you did. I remember I was at an Asthma Society meeting in Ireland. I've never spoken about this because you never want to put this out publicly. But anyway, there was a panel of doctors, and it was all members of the Irish Asthma Society of Ireland. And I attended it. This is in 2005, so I was 3 years into teaching the Buteyko method. And of course, that's quite popular for asthma. Mm-hmm. And the CEO at the time, she sat down beside me at the conference. And I was thinking to myself, why is she sitting down? She knew me, and she was talking to me. And then a couple of minutes into the conversation, she said, Patrick, don't ask any questions. So she silenced me. So she sat down beside me to silence me. Now, there's resistance. And you can be sure every person who tried to bring the science into breathing and to put it out there, we have to bear in mind, anybody who got into breathing got into it because of their own issues. Because that was something that propelled you, because you needed that to continue with it, because all the naysayers and the doubters and the people who were saying that you were doing something that was incorrect and theoretically it wasn't correct. And whenever it was said to me, I was thinking to myself, listen, I've had asthma for 25 years. I've had a stuffy nose. I've had chronic mouth breathing. I've had all of the things that you talk about in your book. but I also addressed them using a physician-developed breathing technique back in the 1950s. And, you know, you needed that, otherwise you wouldn't have continued with it. So it's really amazing. And I know you talked about it in the book as well. You said it was a lot of doctors who were resistant to listening to it. And you said mainly the older doctors. Do you think the younger doctors are open to it?
Oh, now you're really going to put me on the spot here. I think that and there's actually been a few studies on this, so maybe I'll just cite the studies and not my opinion. So
that's all right.
You know,
I like your opinion too, though.
As you get older, I think you get a lot more set in your ways. I mean, I can't tell you how many doctors I've seen in my life who have given me advice that was not only not helpful to me, but just perfectly wrong. And anyone could see that it was wrong by going home or just writing in your phone and looking at, like, completely wrong. So what would possess someone to do something like that? Because that's how they were taught to do it. And they're just repeating what they were taught to do, and they want to poo-poo everyone else that comes in with another opinion. That's not scientific thinking, and that's not medical thinking. If we were thinking like that, if we followed that tract, then there would be no progress in science or in medicine. You know?
Or in any field.
Or in any field.
Would you survive as a journalist if you weren't willing to question everything that came in front of you and to change your ways and your writing style over the years?
Not only to question everything, but to acknowledge, to say, you know what, 10 years ago, I wrote this one fact. I thought it was true at the time. I did my work. There was nothing deceiving about it. It turns out that fact is incorrect. I'm now revising that fact because this is what else I have learned about it. To me, that doesn't put you in a position of weakness. That puts you in a position of honesty with the person you're talking to. And I've found that so many people are resistant on ever saying they were wrong about anything. And that's just not how the system should be working. Medicine is constantly changing. No one's blaming the people that have done these studies. They put forward what they thought was true at the time, but things change. And in some of these studies, as you know as well, sometimes the data is just fudged in one way or the other way, you know, to serve the person that is funding the study. And this is not a conspiracy theory. This isn't a hypothesis. This is absolutely true, and there's so many examples of it. So within all of that huge morass of noise, you just have to try to find the signal, the true signal of that. And that can take a very long time.
If you were to look at your book, so just on that basis, you were saying that, say, somebody said something 10 years ago, now if they were to do it again, they'd say it differently. All the information in your book, that was written, 7 years ago, 6 years ago? Is there anything that you would look back and say that, in hindsight, you should have framed it differently, that science has changed your views, or, you know, what's your opinion? Is there any part of it that you would rewrite?
I have rewritten parts of it. So luckily, there's been enough editions of the book that I talk to doctors and they say, hey, the book was cool, but this part, and this part should have been phrased differently. I say, oh, really? How would you phrase it? I said, hey, that's a really good point. Okay, I'm going to make that note, and I'm going to go back and rephrase it in a way that's even clearer. So I've done that probably a dozen times to this book. And in the last edition, the paperback edition, which just came out in January, I was able to revise a lot of it, that I was not comfortable with how I phrased things. To be clear, there was nothing incorrect in it. This thing was fact-checked over and over and over. Certain phrasings were not as clear as they should have been. And so I took that opportunity to correct those things. So luckily, books are, they're a living, I was going to say a living, breathing thing. I'm going to avoid those puns during this conversation, but it's an amorphous thing to a certain degree, right? And I don't think by me changing those things, I'm not going back on what I said. I'm just trying to provide a further service to the reader to make it patently clear so they don't feel possessed to send me an email. But when I get criticism about the book and about certain sections in it, I listen to that. And some of it's wrong. I say, actually, you're wrong. I believe in what I said here, and I'm going to defend it. And some of it's right. And I say, thanks for letting me know. I want to know that. I want to do a better job and have a book that's that's as honest and as true as I can make it.
And in terms of what you put out there about breathing that probably would have surprised quite a few people, and that's probably the benefits of carbon dioxide and the importance of it and the necessity of it as a gas. Did you come across any kind of rebuttals on carbon dioxide?
Surprisingly, the biochemistry on that is complicated enough that a lot of people just tuned off on that section of the book. I think you were probably into it because you're like a CO2 geek, just like Anders Olsen is really into this stuff. Mm-hmm. But no, and that was one of the sections that I was most careful about. So I talked to 3 or 4 different doctors, and I talked to a biochemist, and I talked to a regular chemist, and I had them read this over and over and over again. I said, I have to get this right because it is upturning so much of what people would think about their breathing and about breathing more and about hyperventilating. Oh, they're getting more. So, no, you're getting less. So that was one thing that I thought that the way that was presented was complicated. I tried to simplify it as much as I could, but I have received no pushback from that. And now what's so interesting about the CO2 thing is when Anders Olsen was telling me about this, 8, 9 years ago, it was like so long ago, I was like, this is edgy stuff, but I'm like, it's true. When I read your books on this, I was like, it's right on the edge, but every time I checked it out, I'm like, it's true. Like, you can prove it. You can measure it.
That's just normal physiology.
See it in yourself.
Well, if you think the Bohr effect, 1904, it's still in every medical textbook. The oxygen dissociation curve is still in every single medical textbook with a section on respiratory physiology. So it holds true.
It holds true for our natural bodies, right? So when you get into inhaling CO2 is when it pushes it a little bit. And so that section specifically, I had to really be careful because I didn't want to overdo it, but I didn't want to underdo it because I wanted to be honest with people. And one thing that's been really interesting in the past 6 years, now there's like a surprising amount of science and studies going into inhaled CO2. There was one I read yesterday, right before I came here, randomly showing that breathing in CO2 in Alzheimer's, it appears to have a positive effect for that. And the irony is, 100 years ago, this stuff was being used for the same exact thing by, leading doctors, leading researchers at leading institutions. And it was systematically buried. And that's the one thing that I wish I would have expanded more in the book. Because at the time I was like, this is starting to sound a bit like a conspiracy theory and all that. But I found a guy a doctor who wrote a book, an entire 600-page book about how CO2 therapy was systematically buried by anesthesiologists because it was invading on their turf. And so it's been very interesting to watch this, I won't call it a revolution, but this uptick of interest in inhaled carbon dioxide. Now Anders has these machines, unclear how legal these are, but where you can inhale CO2, and I've met people who are just like, this thing's changed my life.
Why not breathe less?
You can.
Is that not easier?
I'm not.
I don't want to spend €700 on a machine.
I know.
We produce carbon dioxide in abundance.
I'm not defending. I'm Switzerland here. I'm a neutral territory. I'm a filter. Information comes in. I process it. It comes out the other way. Of course, you can breathe less, right? And we know the science is very clear on that. However, you also know some of these techniques require people to really exert some effort. And as you know today, no one really wants to lift a finger.
No, do you know what? And this is all of the points that you've made, I'm totally in agreement. And I agree with that one. People don't want to do anything. But I think if people were made aware of it, you brought in the science there to show people it's not, breathing is so simple. It's breathe in, breathe out.
I agree.
What can you do with it? You can breathe faster, slower. Mm-hmm. You can breathe fuller breaths, lighter breaths. You can do a breath hold for a short time, for a long time, at the top of the inhaler, at the bottom of the exhale. You can breathe nose, mouth, chest, diaphragm. That's it. Every single breathing exercise under the sun is contained within that. It's so simple. But all it is asking the question, from a breathing perspective, if I change my breathing this way, what's it doing in terms of carbon dioxide, blood circulation, oxygen delivery, vagus nerve stimulation? If I hold my breath, what's it doing? And I think if people understood it, they would actually go for a walk with your mouth closed and just be conscious of breathing a little bit less air. You would have increased blood flow to the brain. I'm going to come back to that Alzheimer's study. That is so exciting. I think that's Safira Ryman from the University of New Mexico. And she published that. That's only out a couple of months, maybe about 4 or 5 months. So she talked about intermittent hypercapnia, that when there's an increase of carbon dioxide in the lungs and blood, so with the increase of CO2 in the blood, it causes vasodilation. So there's increased blood flow to the brain, and that's pushing the cerebrospinal fluid out. And then when you go back to normal breathing, the blood vessels narrow because of the lowering of carbon dioxide, and cerebrospinal fluid comes back into the brain. And it's the movement of the cerebrospinal fluid into the brain and out of the brain that's helping to get rid of the accumulation of different toxins such as amyloid beta, which are implicated in increasing the risk of Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's as well, I think. Really promising. So exciting, isn't it?
It is. And, you can get those effects, as you said, with your natural. How many breathwork techniques have you breathe and then hold your breath? And then breathe again and hold your breath? I mean, you look at any modality from ancient Hindu practices, yoga practices, you look at Qigong, ancient Chinese practices, you look at new practices, quote unquote new practices like Wim Hof technique, you're breathing a lot and you're holding your breath. So I think it goes back to even people that understand the physiology, the biochemistry, that it works. Okay, I don't know how it is in Ireland, but in the United States, people need an easy switch.
Oh, Ireland too.
For everything. And if they don't get it, they won't do it. So I know how easy it is to convert yourself to be a better breather, to become a nose. Because I did all this the old school way with a notepad, with little alarms on my phone. And that's how I was convinced this stuff was extremely beneficial to people, because I felt it in myself, because I was in bad shape, bad respiratory shape. But nowadays, everything, because thanks or no thanks to biohacking, techniques, it's people want everything in a bottle. And I think that this modality of CO2 therapy for people who are not energized enough to get up off the sofa and spend 5 minutes doing something.
Haven't suffered enough, James.
Listen, my inbox is filled. I mean, thousands and thousands of emails of people that are begging me to cheerlead them on to become better breathers. And I'm done with it. I'm just done with it. And I'm done with it because what you need to know is in this book, is in all the books that you've written, is available for free on podcasts, is available for free on YouTube, is available for free on AI. Now, how do I become a better breather? It's actually pretty accurate, right? And what those things don't offer people is the gumption to get up and actually do the thing. It's the same thing with nutritional sciences. We know how to lose weight, right? We know how to lower blood glucose. We know how to get rid of diabetes for a lot of people, type 2 diabetes for a lot of people. How many people actually do the thing? Not many. So what I've noticed is I think I've spent so much time, so much energy trying to cheerlead and convince people, come on, you can do it. Come on, anyone can do it. Come on, get up. And then to watch 99% of those people not do the thing, and then to come back and be like, I need more cheerleading. I now want to place my energy on people who have the will and the interest to get up and do the thing themselves. Not to go and hike Everest, but to spend 10 minutes a day to improve their health, to go out and get some sleep tape and try to nasal breathe at work for 15 minutes. Like, that is the area that energizes me, because it's these stories from those people that you hear where their life becomes transformed and the health of their kids becomes transformed because this stuff is real. So that's what I'm trying to focus on. And that's why I actually think, you will disagree, I fully respect that, some of these modalities, like if you've ever taken a hit off of CO2, it's instant wow, and it can convince you that there is a lot you can do in a very short amount of time. That's in some ways cheating, you could say, because you can do it while holding your breath as well. But if you're someone who can't hold their breath or is only going to be interested if the volume's cranked up to 11 when they do something, then that could be something that would be a nice doorway to open and let them walk in through.
The only thing I'm going to say, I agree with what you're saying, but I wasn't going to fully agree with it. If somebody has poor breathing, it's not going to address their underlying breathing patterns.
Of course not.
Okay, it might reduce the chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide, but if they're going around with their mouth open, if they have faster breathing, if they're not able to self-regulate in a stressful situation, I don't know about you, but the breathing did something huge for me in terms of one aspect of my health. And I'm just wondering, does it coincide with yours? What's the single best thing that it did for you? If you were to look at, we can talk about mental health, sleep health, respiratory health, physical fitness, anything and everything in between. What was the one thing it did for you?
I do want to answer your question about CO2 therapy. So by no means will this help them become nasal breathers or to breathe deep into, you engage their diaphragm. But by no means. What I was saying is for someone who is walking up to a door that is locked and has been locked for a long time, if you can offer just to crack it open a half of an inch to make them say, wow, I think I can do this. There is something here. That thing just blew my mind. What else is there out there to pique their curiosity? The door opens and then they have to do the real work. This is just that slight little push to get them over, which is why when I do talks, I have everyone, even though it's corny, even though people are in suit, even though they look at me and shoot daggers at me because they don't want to stand up and put their hand on their belly because it's incriminating in some way. If you can just get half the crowd to feel something in 30 seconds, that door tends to just slightly crack open. And if you have that, they might have the curiosity to go in further.
Fair point.
So, your question now was what technique?
No, not so much a technique. Like if somebody was to ask me, what has breathing really done for me? I would straight away say this. What does it do for you?
I mean, what doesn't it do for me? And I mean that's a corny, it sounds like a cheap answer, but you think about sleep, you think about athletic performance, you think about how your face is going to grow if you're younger, you think about anxiety. I think about stress levels when I'm in airports, which is all the time. If I'm not able to walk around and breathe into a count of 4 and out to a count of 4, through my nose, I don't know what I would do. So it really feels like I was living 2 different lives. I know that, again, sounds corny, but it's true. And the big regret I have about learning all of this, like later in my life, is that, man, if I had known this when I was 8 years old, if I had known it when I was 16 years old, if I had known it when I was 25, and that's what burns me up. No one told me it. And I think that I would have been someone that would have glommed onto it and would have actually applied myself to improving my breathing at those various stages of my life because the benefits are so pronounced. So there is not one thing that it's done for me. It's done a lot of things simultaneously. And I hear that from people all the time. Once you focus on sleep, then it turns out, oh, this helps with my focus at work. Oh, this helps with my anxiety or my COPD or, my asthma and more. And I think that that's what it's all about. It's a truly holistic thing. It's a whole body treatment.
So if I'm reading it right, then it's almost that you've kind of embraced this and you've brought it into your way of life. So in terms of, I'd love to know your routine. You go to bed at night. Do you use nasal breathing support? Do you have some MyoTape? What do you do when you get up in the morning? If you're feeling stressed, okay, you said breathe in for 4 and out for 4. Do you do formal practice? Do you not?
People ask me this a lot. A lot of breath workers ask me this because they want to know the secret.
There's no secret.
They're just like, you just blew my response, man. There's no secret, Patrick. There's no.
But I'm just
no
intrigued about what you do.
So I think a lot of people think like my life now is sitting around and breathing and trying out different techniques, and that would be a beautiful life if I could live that life. If I could stay at home, sit in different corners of the room and experiment with different modalities, I'd be really, really happy. But that's not my life.
It's not practical.
It's not. I live a completely deranged, stressed out, very busy, very, very busy life. And so the thing that breathing techniques, and I'm not going to call it breathwork, has done most for me is I have adopted better habits. And that took probably a few months to really get these habits down. And once you adopt better habits, you don't need to think about how you're breathing all the time. So I instinctively will be able to adopt my body to whatever situation I'm in. Sometimes I have to consciously do it. If I notice I'm in, line at an airport, I'm late for my flight, I feel the heart ticking up because if I miss this flight, I'm going to miss the next flight. If I miss that, I'm going to miss the conference. If I miss that, then why am I even on this trip? Then I'll really slow things down and take control of it. If I'm walking around, I'm never breathing through my mouth. And previously, the vast majority of my life, I was breathing through my mouth the whole time, every night. Whenever I was jogging, whenever I was surfing, whenever I was working, I know that I was breathing through my mouth. So I think that once you convert, right, you have fewer boxes to check. Am I doing this? Am I doing this? I'm doing this. And you have a natural ability to sense the stress or the environment and to adopt your breathing to that. In addition to that, I still do breath work techniques, but they've almost become part of my metabolism and not something I consciously do. When I go to sleep at night, at the end of a very long day, I'll definitely notice I'm going to be exhaling more than I'm inhaling. If I happen to be reading a book, my body knows how I've written about it for so long. I've been doing it for so long that it's just become part of who I am at this time. And having said that, it's nice to have access to so many different actual techniques. I won't call them breathwork techniques because I realize practices that if I'm in a hotel and I have 10 minutes before I have to go live in front of 2,000 people, I'll know what to do to lift my energy up or to calm myself down. And as you mentioned, it's not that complicated.
No.
It's all this crap, and it's almost like if you think about those wheels that you use to write music to, like all these chords go, or even complementary colors on a color wheel. You're just sort of doing this, and you're making different colors, but it's all within the wheel.
So the listener is going to be intrigued now. You're going to talk to 2,000 people, and so today you go out and you're feeling tired. How are you going to ramp yourself up?
I'm going to start to do some breathing, which I don't think Patrick McKeown over here would appreciate so much. But this is what we do differ on some things, ladies and gentlemen. I will do some rapid breathing. I will do some Kundalini type breathing. I know where your thought is about this. I fully respect
I fill in the gaps. But when you say rapid breathing, so you really speed up the respiratory rate.
Yes.
Is it a count of 1.5 in, 1.5 out? Is it that wouldn't be really rapid though. 1 and 1. So is 30 breaths per minute would be 30, 40, 50 breaths per minute. Is it very small tidal volume? I know you're
very
really
small tidal volume.
So
it's very
it's
small,
rapid and tiny tidal volume.
Yes.
Okay.
It is. This is just the signal to get the sympathetic nervous system, to ramp it up all the way, and then to hold your breath and to teach your body. Okay, I can turn on stress. Now I'm going to turn it off, and I'm in control. This other monkey in the back of my head is not in control. I'm in control, and I'm going to be in control when I go up on that stage, and I'm going to be calm about it. So I think that those tricks, I mean, a lot of people refer to it as Wim Hof method, even though he's very clear. The modality of breathing very fast and holding your breath, or breathing very fast and breathing very slow. People identify that with like, oh, that's Wim Hof method. That is almost every pranayama that has been around.
It is, but it depends on the tidal volume there as well, because like, you know, if you're going out on stage, I remember going to do an exam. It's back in 1997. I read this book. Can't remember what the name of it was. And the individual said, take these full deep breaths. And I was stressed going into the exam. I was a chronic mouth breather. I had very poor concentration. And it was a university exam, so it was pretty, you know, important. So instead of walking into the exam hall, I took a walk for about 2 minutes. And I took these full deep breaths for 2 minutes. Full deep breaths. Because, of course, the belief was there's more oxygen going to the brain. It's going to make me more alert. And I went in and I sat in the exam hall and the table. How do you think I felt?
Completely stressed out.
I felt disoriented. And it took me about 15 minutes and I felt spaced out to get my head together. And that's why, I suppose, when I addressed my own breathing issues, I didn't address it by hyperventilating. I addressed it by hypoventilating. And it wasn't that I wanted to breathe less all the time. It was just that I wanted to address my chronic overbreathing, my mouth breathing, my upper chest breathing. I would have had a fast respiratory rate. My resting heart rate, when I was testing it back in the late 1990s, was 80 beats per minute. I was 26 years of age. So that's how, you know, sometimes I'm curious as to why people go into different camps, if they are different camps. And no, I'd be open-minded now with breathing, and genuinely, because the oxygen advantage is not based on tradition. Like, we actually do hyperventilation, and it's not the Wim Hof method. We don't, you know, we create our own breathing exercises, and breathing exercises are easy to create. All you're doing is dealing with the breath in, the breath out. When you create a breathing exercise, you just need to know what's that breathing exercise doing to the health of that person, to their age, taking into consideration their age and their breathing pattern. And the other aspect is, what's it doing in terms of the biochemistry, the biomechanics, the immune system, and the psychophysiological. So it's very easy to create a breathing framework. But the camp, were you ever intrigued as to why some people love hyperventilating and some people are trending towards breathing less, doing the opposite?
Because hyperventilating gets you extremely high.
But I wouldn't have done that for me. I would have felt shit.
No, but I mean, that's why. Talk about, if you want to, people say, oh, breathing doesn't do anything, it doesn't matter. You have them hyperventilate, do some Sudarshan Kriya for 10 minutes. They say, oh my God, what the hell just happened? I felt like I was coming out of my body, you know? So I'm not saying that's good or bad. I think it's beneficial because it gets people out of their limitations, you know, and I'm not saying that that's going to be the right breathing modality for everyone all the time. But again, I think my job, if I have any job at all, is to take people up to a door that was closed for a long time and to just barely crack it.
Oh, you've done it, James.
Once you're in, that's your business,
yes.
right? That's
yes,
where my job is over. There's so many other doors in that room. There's so many other windows that you have to find the thing that works for you. But to me, it's whatever it takes to get someone to do that. And I love hyperventilation techniques. I love them. They make me feel great. I feel clear afterwards. I have insane psychedelic dreams during the nighttime, you know, whenever I do those right before bed. I really like them. I don't do them often. I think there's a time and place for them. But when I do them, I really enjoy them. Am I saying that these are right for everyone all the time? I would never say that. I'm just saying for me, they're great. For the rest of the time, breathing slow, breathing low, breathing deep. I mean, that's the baseline, right? And then once you're good at that, only once you figure that out, should you start flirting around with other stuff.
Now I agree with you.
So, okay.
And you know where I'm coming from.
I know where you're coming from.
For example, when I was that kid back in 1998, and I was already stressed in chronic mouth breathing and overbreathing, and no doubt if my end-tidal CO2 was measured, it would have been quite low. I'd say very, very low 30s. So because I was already in that state of hyperventilation, the fact that I did the 2 or 3 minutes of these full deep breaths, I blew off so much carbon dioxide, but then it took such a long time to return back to baseline. And it totally put me off. And it was only then I remember the day sitting down and I did this exercise to decongest my nose and it worked. I said, oh my God, this thing works. And I then started practicing breathing less air, which is the opposite to what you hear. You know, like what gets most of the attention? Breathing more air. So we're saying breathing less air. Well, not always. Sometimes we do say breathe more air. But I remember putting it into practice and the temperature of my hands internally increased, not just because I had my hands against my body. I felt calmer and I felt a change come over me. And I lived in my head for 26 years. And that's why I asked you, I was just intrigued. What did you get most out of it? Like for me, reducing rumination of the mind. My thought activity has reduced by about 30%.
It's interesting that both you and I came to generally the same place in our lives in a strange way, but from opposite ends. Like that was the thing that did it for you. And for me, it was the volume up to 11. This thing just blew my mind, you know, and that's how the book starts, because I needed that convincing of something that was just going to be completely over the top for me to understand what might be sitting below it. So going into that Sudarshan Kriya class, you know, God, how many years ago was that? I don't even know now. But that was the thing that just sweating through my T-shirt, my hair sopping wet. I'm like, how is this physically, biologically possible that I was able to do this? And from my mind, from a journalist standpoint and from my health standpoint, that is what absolutely turned me on to this stuff, is that extremity. Whereas you needed to be more balanced and centered, right? And so you finally got the feeling of what it's like to be balanced and centered. And that's what turned you on to it. So I think no matter how you come to it, there's that light bulb moment that you have to have in order to come in deeper and want to learn more about it.
What's the listener going to make of all of this? They're going to think, here's two breathing, I was going to say two breathing idiots here having a conversation, and now the listener is going to go away and they're saying one person is saying this and the other person is saying that. What can they get out of it?
But I think we're saying the same thing. I mean, this is not a vegan versus keto argument. In my mind, maybe that would be more.
But
interesting
in terms of their
for the
practice,
listener.
in terms of their, so say for example, they're feeling that they want to go into breathing.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's two doors.
We're
So
gonna
do they go this door or this door?
So let's use that analogy of like the carnivore versus the vegan. Let's think about what they agree on. They agree on no processed foods. Okay, processed food is bad. Let's start there, and then we can start teasing it apart. You get rid of processed foods, you're probably 80% there on either side of that, and the other 20% really matters. But you're 80% there. I think that what both you and I are saying is we came to this stuff from different ends, but we ended up in what I would assume not 100% in the same spot, but like 95%. And that 5% difference is a matter of our personal preferences. So what you've said in all of your podcasts, in all of your books to all of your students is exactly what I'm saying, the same thing. You don't want processed food, for your nutrition. You don't want crappy mouth breathing, over breathing air for what comes into your body. And how you stop yourself from breathing in a crappy way, there's many different ways of doing that. You have your approach to it, and I have mine, and I think those two Venn diagrams are almost completely overlap. So I don't feel this as an opposing forces thing. I think we're saying the same thing. So if you are that listener and you are even more confused now because I brought in a vegan carnivore diet analogy here, and you say that still doesn't make any sense, all you need to do, this is it. You're going to breathe through your nose, okay? Even when you're exercising, maybe up to zone 5, you can default to an occasional mouth breath as long as it's conscious. But you are going to focus on nasal breathing, especially at night. 100% of your breaths at night need to be in and out through your nose, right? You're going to want to breathe slow and low, okay? You're going to want to have a relaxed belly. You want to feel that diaphragm descend and come back up. Is that hard? I think you agree with that.
Total agreement.
So if anyone is listening, that's what you do. It could take you a long time to get there. Some people who have severe nasal breathing problems, they have structural problems, they are chronically congested, but
they can even assess that in terms of do the nose and blocking exercise. It's in the book. Do it 5 or 6 times. Can you breathe through your nose comfortably for 3 minutes during sitting? That's part 1. And then can you go for a walk and breathe through your nose, while you're walking? And is it relatively comfortable? And even if you feel a little air hunger, because the air hunger that you experience when you transition from mouth to nasal breathing isn't just because of possible nasal obstruction. The dysfunctional breathing pattern is going to generate air hunger because the individual has a strong sensitivity to the gas carbon dioxide. So bearing in mind that people who might be new, it's carbon dioxide that, of course, is the driver to breathe and not oxygen. And the question is, if you've been going around with your mouth open for yonks, you can have a strong sensitivity to the accumulation of carbon dioxide, resulting in faster, harder breathing. So when you switch from mouth to nasal breathing, you may feel a little air hunger, but your point is stick with it because the nose does everything with the breath and the mouth is simply not for breathing.
I could not agree more. And that nasal piece, just like what I use the analogy of the processed food piece being 80% of like proper diet, the nasal breathing piece, I would probably say, is 70% of proper breathing. Because if you are just breathing through your nose, the other things are very important to breathe slow. But instinctively, if you're breathing through your nose, you're going to be much more apt to be taking those fuller, slower breaths. So whenever people ask, what do? I say, you start with that. And you figure that out, then come back to me. And then we're going to start to expand it out. But you have to get the nose thing first. So like, well, I can't. I want to fast forward to all this other stuff. Too bad. You have to get the nose thing down first. And that's just how it is.
I wonder, can we tease out some of the functions and the benefits of breathing in and out through the nose? Because I've stood up at a conference in Chicago. It was actually a medical conference. And Professor of Medicine stood up and said there was no difference between breathing through the nose. It seems that I'm hitting doctors here now, but it's not.
Was he old? Was he an older doctor?
He was old. Total agreement with your book, right? And I was just saying, small little me, oh my God, here's this big professor of medicine saying it didn't matter whether you were breathing through your nose or mouth. And luckily enough, Dr. Kevin Boyd was in the audience and he stood up and he supported me. Other than that, I would have been, because when you have this heavyweight criticizing you in a public environment is not particularly helpful. But that was his criticism. It doesn't make any difference whether you breathe through your nose or breathe through your mouth. What would you have said?
I think a couple years ago that would have really gotten me going and I would have shared a bunch of thoughts to him. Now I would just say, if that's what you believe, then that's fine. See this new space I'm in, Patrick? I feel like I'm a quitter now. No, I would have tried to engage him and asked him specific questions on why evolution was so careful in imbuing us not only with a nose, but with all these different sinus passages that are extremely detailed and specific and take up a huge amount of real estate in this very precious head. We don't have a lot of space in the head. Brain, does a lot. The eyes take up some. Our mouths take up some. So why would that be? I mean, these are the same people that say, tonsils don't matter. Adenoids don't matter. Here, we're going to take out your gallbladder. That doesn't matter. You don't need a spleen. You don't need an appendix. I mean, it's just the same thing. So I would have him in all of his I don't know if it was a he or a she, but in infinite, knowledge in these things to have him explain what specifically he means. And I think by having someone explain it out loud, they would then see the falseness of that is a ridiculous thing. Like I could see someone, wanting to get more interested in taking on something like CO2, because we're taught, someone that deals with people with emphysema, they're like, these people have way too much CO2, right? CO2 is bad. It's like, okay, this is going to be an interesting conversation from two different perspectives. But something like that, I mean, you could just look it up on your phone in 2 seconds. And the fact that they don't do that, but they're out in public saying these things, what can you do to change someone's mind about that if they don't want to change their mind? And I've come to the conclusion, not much, but thank God Kevin was there. Kevin
totally.
knows a thing or two about proper breathing.
Totally relieved
What
the pressure.
did Kevin say? Now I'm just very curious.
Oh, Kevin said he totally disagreed with him. And Kevin had no problem saying it. So no, I'm sure Kevin might listen to this podcast. But yeah, he stood up. Because I actually felt very uneasy, because of, like, it was a medical conference and probably 300 to 500 people there, all healthcare physicians. I'm the only one in there teaching breathing, really. And for somebody to kind of put me down. So, but that was after I talked about the importance of the nose. And like I would have been, again, I would always try and support it because I wanted always to move away from left of field. I felt that breathing will never be mainstream if we did left of field. Like I've the same ideas as you. We do need to make it mainstream. And sometimes what I talk about now in terms of the mouth, to simplify it with people, and it took me a while to get to this very simple place. What's inside your mouth? So what's inside your mouth, James? Your teeth.
I mean, an hour ago, it was some rice and some asparagus and some. There's probably bits of that. It might even be a little bit of breakfast left over.
So
no, of course, I've got a tongue, I've got teeth, and what are those for? What role do those play in breathing?
That's exactly the question. And it really boils down to that. If you isolate every single thing inside your mouth and you ask, what does this do with breathing? That's it. Okay, the mouth, you can breathe through it. It's an emergency, but it doesn't mean that should be the default way of breathing.
But you're approaching an illogical question with logic. And what I've noticed is that never works for someone who has no curiosity, who literally can't bother to spend 1 minute to research what they're about to say to you. So that's why you can try to engage someone like that, but if they aren't even curious to listen to you, then this is where I'm trying to conserve my energy. Because I've engaged those people a lot. Like I still get a bunch of crap from people. Still to this day, people read the section of the book about Katerina Schroth. So this was this person who had scoliosis, and she breathed herself to have a straight spine. Okay. And then she taught hundreds, now thousands and thousands of women to do this who had extreme scoliosis, so much so that the hospital said, we don't know what to do with you. Go sit in bed the rest of your life. So there are pictures of this, of these women. So they're breathing and doing stretches, right? And then they stretch them out. Like it's a hardcore thing. But the core of this was breathing into this lung, breathing into this lung, back and forth over and over and over. So the science is there. The school is still there. The pictures are there. The videos are there. People still say, you can't cure scoliosis. I was like, yeah, maybe you can't cure it, but you can definitely straighten the spine by adjusting your breathing and doing these postures, they say. Listen, I've been researching this for 30 years. Like, you're a journalist, I'm a doctor. That is impossible. So whoever told you that is wrong. I said, well, did you see the papers in the back and the pictures? Yeah, I saw those, but I'm just telling you that's impossible. So that happens quite a fair amount. And there's something about the scoliosis part of that book that people really have a hard time about. But to me, that is the most patently clear evidence that you could provide to someone. And it's touching to meet people who have gone through that program, who had severe scoliosis, whose spines are perfectly straight now. Totally. They're like, why isn't anyone talking about this? I said, I don't know.
Totally. But even if you had a parent had a child, God Almighty, you'd absolutely want to have a non-invasive way to help improve. And I know you said it's not a cure, but at least it'll teach the child not to do the wrong thing. You're talking about getting better function of the diaphragm, and the diaphragm providing stabilization of the spine.
That's exactly
that is support there. It just makes total sense, between functional breathing and functional movement.
You know what Andrew Weil told me? He said that he learned from his mentor that, his mentor asked him, he said, why do people get scoliosis? And while was like, oh, I don't know, is it genetic? It's like, we still don't know. If you look it up, we still don't know. His mentor told him that it was caused by improper breathing when you're young, by having improper stance, improper posture. You go to bed at night, your body is curved like this. This lung is constantly inflating. This one is not. The spine in those years of very quick development, the spine starts growing. You don't fix your posture. So that's what Andrew Weil told me. There's no way to prove that. We can't get 100 kids and have them breathe one way and have some controls breathe another way. But to me, I thought that was interesting, and that's one of those things you can't prove, but intuitively it makes sense to me. So if that's what causes some curvature of the spine, then it's reasonable to think that you could correct it that way. What you were saying about a parent wanting their kid to have the best possible chances of living a healthy and normal life, true, but that parent has to be open-minded and critical enough to take the first step. And what I've noticed is a lot of parents aren't. And I'm not here to rip on parents. It's really hard being a parent, right? There's a lot of different variables.
Demands.
But you have to be willing to look outside the box in which we have all been put into. And it's a box that is very quickly crumbling right now, as far as what we thought was possible with human biology and what we thought was right as far as medicine goes. And you're starting to see that collapse in a lot of ways, and it's being collapsed by leaders in the field, by doctors who are coming out and saying, we did this thing this way, and it was wrong, so now we're correcting it. An example of this is, it wasn't too long ago that doctors were telling parents, they're like, whatever you do, don't introduce peanuts to your kids, because if you introduce peanuts to your kids, then they're going to become illiterate, so don't do this. So peanut allergies are just like out of control, right? They go up 1,000% in a decade. And now what do doctors say? First thing you should do is introduce peanuts to kids, because we don't want them to become allergic to it.
And that was on the flight last night. There was an announcement. There's somebody on the flight.
Okay.
Don't
have
eat
any
peanuts.
parents on that.
Yeah, don't eat peanuts. The peanuts wouldn't be distributed because there was somebody with an anaphylaxis reaction to peanuts. Coming back to oral breathing, so mouth breathing itself, it's so simple, and I know we want to touch on it. One aspect of it is in terms of dental hygiene. And I don't know, I wasn't giving it enough attention. You know, but when the mouth is open and you're breathing through it persistently, the mouth dries up because we lose a lot of moisture from the mouth by exhaling it. And the saliva isn't replaced quick enough, so the mouth will dry, and then the environment of the mouth is dried. It changes bacteria, changes the microbiome in the mouth, and it increases the risk of dental cavities, gum disease. There's so much going on there. I can't get over it. I can't get my head around it. I have to give a presentation to a group of dentists in Boston in about 2 weeks. So I had to put this PowerPoint together, and it forced me to do a deep dive, and I needed to make sure all the science was there. But at the end of it, James, I was just saying, how on earth have dentists missed this? And I'm not talking about our airway dentists. There's cohorts of dentists who fully get this, and they fully know the microbiome in terms of Dr. Stacey Whitman and others. But we're talking about 95% of dentists have forgotten or overlooked in terms of dental hygiene, because dental hygiene must be the most important, or at least one of the most important things, because your traditional dentist is there to treat teeth, treat cavities, make sure the mouth is in good health, but yet they haven't considered mouth breathing.
I should send you a study I found from like 1890, where dentists were talking about this exact same thing.
For oral hygiene.
Yes. They said mouth breathing is the worst thing that you can do for cavities as well. If you eat a bunch of carbohydrates, if you eat sugar and then are mouth breathing, it's just a breeding ground for bacteria that's going to cause cavities. So I don't know why dentists aren't sharing this with their kids, with their parents. You could look at this very cynically. I'm not saying that this is my viewpoint. I'm just saying a cynic's viewpoint of this is, why would a dentist who is making a killing, drilling, filling, and billing, want to make their patients less apt to see them and give them less work? Like, what would be the incentive to have their patients grow naturally straight teeth by breathing through the nose, by swallowing and thrusting the tongue to the roof of the mouth and not like this, by not eating a bunch of crackers and goldfish, Pepperidge Farm goldfish, and being a mouth breathing? So that's what a cynic would say, right? Is you were significantly decreasing your client base. So I think on the other end, if you're a holistic dentist who is more interested in keeping their patients healthy through preventative health, and they have other means of getting an income, and they're an airway-focused dentist, then you want to establish this early and develop these good habits. And it's a very simple thing. And that's what's so crazy about this stuff. Like, I've spoken at a lot of dentistry. You think you write a book about breath, you're not going to be speaking to a bunch of dentists all the time. That's what I did for years and years. Even 88 conferences, half the dentists are like nodding their head. They're just like, yeah. The other half are just like so pissed off at me. And they tell me so at the end. They're like, what right do you have to come in here and spread these rumors? I said, if ever you want to sit down and talk about the science, talk about data, I'm here anytime you want to. And it can be a friendly, constructive conversation. Maybe I'll learn something. Maybe you'll learn something too. Not once has anyone actually followed through on that. Not once. So they just want to complain. So I think the dentistry right now, is speaking at these conferences, it is right now splitting in this huge way, where one side is focusing on the airway side, on how to prevent problems. It's almost like one side's moving towards the Chinese medicine model, where their whole model is preventative maintenance. That's the deal. They're less good at dealing with something once it becomes really serious. The whole model is preventive maintenance. Then the other side that actively just wants to repeatedly be correcting problems without fixing the core issue behind all of them. And the science behind all this is not controversial stuff we're talking about. It is all out there for anyone who wants to look it up. If people think we're flaky and we're just making this stuff up, spend 5 minutes to do your own research. It's all out there. But the fact that the message hasn't been given to kids drives me freaking crazy. And that is one of the things that fires me up every time I do a talk, not in front of dentists because they don't want to hear it, but for a talk for anyone else, I always include the stuff about kids. I say, hey, who has kids out there? Okay, this is what you do. And it doesn't take a lot of time to write this down, but do this, not for you, not because you need something else to do, but do this for your kid, because I promise you they're going to thank you later on. I wish my mom had known this stuff and done it to me. I would have been a lot happier and had a lot fewer issues.
Because I was thinking, I could understand from some points why a dentist wouldn't want to get involved with breathing, because maybe the dentist feels it's not their field. But it was only when I started doing a deep dive into it, it's unbelievable. And also the microbiome from the mouth translocating to the gut, and the gastric acids don't neutralize all of, the different, there's such a diversity of microbiome in the mouth, and that's not particularly a good thing. They've detected, for example, gingivalis in the brains of people with Alzheimer's. So you'd wonder how on earth, what's going on there? Is it just, I don't know the full ins and outs of it. But I would really say to people, I would say, number one, if it's a dentist listening, breathing is really, really applicable in your industry. You don't have to be an airway dentist. You don't have to be an orthodontist. We're talking about the basic stuff here. This is about oral hygiene. Every hygienist in the Western world who's looking into the mouth of a child or adult, talking about what can you do to improve oral hygiene, they'll talk about flossing, brushing teeth, avoiding foods that are processed or sugary, etc., to increase the risk. Who is talking about mouth breathing? Persistent mouth breathing. And here's the thing about mouth breathing. It's a hard one to quantify, isn't it? Because if somebody comes into you You know, the two guys earlier on, for example, who are probably listening, could you quantify whether one of them was a mouth breather based on the interaction that we had? There's no definition of mouth breathing. It's a difficult one to pin down. Do you think it might have held things back a bit?
I think that it maybe is difficult to pin down for yourself, but it's not difficult to pin down for someone else, especially your kid. Parents know when their kids are mouth breathing. I mean, they know. It's a very obvious thing, and they can hear them in the other room snoring. And so I think it's such a disservice to that kid's health to not address that. If you're talking about, is it a dentist's job, responsibility to train people how to breathe? No, it's not. But it's a dentist's job. It's a human's job to explain something very simply and very quickly to someone who's going to suffer some serious damage.
Yes.
Okay. I think that is anyone's job, not just a dentist, not just a doctor. But hey, Carol, your son here is a chronic mouth breather. You should really get that under control because it's going to cause a bunch of problems with how his face is going to grow, with his oral health, with his respiratory health, and more. Here's a card of some information you can look up, you know, at the NIH or whatever. Like that does not take that long to do.
Totally.
So I don't understand and this is where you start putting these pieces together. You're like, well, what's the resistance? Are you in the business of helping people or just making a quick buck on the backside? I think you can probably do both if you build, like some of the most successful dentists I know. There's a guy, Miguel Stanley here at the White Clinic, you know, right down the road is the most famous dentist in the world. And he's established that reputation by looking at the whole body, not just the mouth, but the whole body. So, of course, he does, like, fills cavities and all that stuff. But he tries to make it so his patients don't have to keep coming back to fill cavities so they can focus on other parts of their health. So I think that's where, if you really want to grow your business and you want to get, like, a dedicated following of people, you take that approach. You really care about them. You care about them as people, not just as teeth.
But that's what it's about, though. For the customer to come back is do your best for that person. And doing your best will be encouraging, exactly as you spoke about there, the importance of breathing in and out through the nose. And it comes back to, so one might say, well, I'm a nose breather. I have my mouth closed during rest. But they forget one considerable time that a lot of people can have their mouth open, and that's during sleep. So we're talking about 6 to 8 hours, and the stats are in around 50%. Now, again, not so much studies backing it up, but where you can find the evidence, typically in around 50% of people wake up with a dry mouth.
50 to 60, I've seen up to 60% of people. So again, hard thing to find, you know, quantifiable data, but roundabout figures, it's half the population. So I think when you look at mouth breathing, that is where I would focus the most time. It's important in the day. Don't get me wrong. It's important when you're working out, but I tell people to really focus on your sleep, your nasal breathing when you're sleeping, because what will happen in sleep will generally help to carry on into the day, and what happens in the day will carry on to sleep. Because so many people, we do these retreats, you know, and we can train people how to breathe better, and we can train them like on all the specifics. But I say, if after this class you feel good, you go back to your room and you sleep with an open mouth, you're taking so many of the benefits that you just worked really hard over the last few days to develop, and they're just going out the window. So focusing on sleep, I think, is actually the most important thing with breathing. I'm saying that out loud, wondering if I agree with myself. I think it might be. And because it's easily diagnosable with somebody else. And what I've found is it is the thing that people will feel the most benefit from the most quickly. So once you convert to nasal breathing, you become comfortable with it at night. This is where these light bulbs really go off for people. Like, oh my God, if that did that for me during sleep, what's it going to do for the other 16 hours out of the day? And that was certainly my experience with experimenting with sleep tape and learning how to breathe through my nose. And I use this stuff every single night. It doesn't matter where I am. It doesn't matter if I'm camping. You know, I use it every night because I know what happens when I don't. I know how crappy I feel the next day.
And I think it's not just even for normal people. In terms of when they switch to mouth breathing, it really has an adverse effect on their sleep quality. They spend less time in deep sleep, more time in light sleep. And they wake up feeling unrefreshed. But people with obstructive sleep apnea, so I'm not sure how much of a dive you've done in this one, but it's 936 million people are estimated to have OSA on this planet. And that's according to a Lancet review back in either 2017 or 2019. So 936 million people. And when I look at, again, I'm writing a review article on mouth leak. So the traditional form of treatment is continuous positive airway pressure, CPAP machine. And it was designed by an Australian doctor, Colin O'Sullivan. So he actually designed it for nasal administration. So his early prototypes were a nasal mask. And the air was going to come in the nose, down the back of the nose, down the throat to splint open the airway. But of course, a lot of people, they give a CPAP, it's about 26, 28%. And what happens is the air comes in the nose, partially down the throat and out the mouth, right? It's called mouth leak. And mouth leak has been identified for since probably the mid-80s, so going back quite a bit. And very little research on it, other than they know that people who are mouth leaking have reduced adherence to CPAP. And as a result, they just give it up because what tends to happen is if you're mouth leaking, you're given this full face mask. And the full face mask then, because your mouth is open, so you're allowed mouth breathe or mouth leak, and also possibly even for mouth breathers as well. The mouth is open, the tongue is in the low resting posture, the mandible is set back, the airway is narrow. So now you have to crank up the pressure to splint open the airway because you're fighting against the tongue and the lower jaw, and the person can't tolerate it. I would love to see the day that CPAP users would start getting their mouth closed and trained in nasal breathing, because if doctors want them, like if you want your client to continue using the CPAP, we need to address mouth leak and oral breathing.
When I said that the most controversial thing in the book that I get the most pushback on was the idea that you can straighten a scoliotic spine with better breathing, I was incorrect. So I'm going to re-edit what I said and say it's this thing that I've gotten. They're close, but I think there's 1% more. Let's talk about it. Okay. So a lot of people in sleep medicine, I've spoken at a lot of sleep medicine conferences as well. I do my same talk. People get the same talk. I don't edit things out to make this more appealing to... So it's the basis is the same, and then I'll spruce it up in different ways. So people have stood up in audiences and said, I agree with what you're saying most of the time, nasal breathing at night, but you are 100% wrong when it comes to sleep apnea. You are 100% wrong. It is so dangerous to sleep with a closed mouth if you have sleep apnea. And I said, okay. So this has happened numerous times. I've gotten some very angry letters from people. I think what people are confused about is if you're someone with extreme, very, very bad OSA, and you immediately go out and buy some duct tape and duct tape your mouth and try to sleep through the mouth, try to breathe through your nose and say that I'm just going to get rid of my sleep, that is
insane.
Catastrophic failure across the board. I would never, ever say that, ever. And I said, where did I say that in the book? I don't see that. So if you approach this differently, where you try to nasal breathe for 5 minutes, and then the next day wear a little piece of tape and answer emails for 10 minutes, and the next day maybe 20 minutes, is that comfortable? Why don't you take a nap for 15 minutes, right? Is that still comfortable? Okay. Let's ramp it up after maybe a couple weeks, breathing through the nose while you're walking, while you're working, while you're doing dishes, while you're watching TV. Are you comfortable? Maybe you can start experimenting with it for a couple hours at night. If at any time you're uncomfortable, be reasonable and logical and take the frickin' tape off. Not a huge leap to be able to make that conclusion. So people say, okay, well, that makes sense, but I see what you're saying about snoring and nasal breathing, how you could decrease snoring, but you can't do anything for sleep apnea. It's a different mechanism. I'm here to say that's completely false. You absolutely can. And the proof is I also get these letters from a lot of people who have shown me their AHIs of just switching to nasal breathing, cut in half, cut by 3/4, sometimes completely resolved. And these are people who had sleep apnea, who were not just snoring. So I think it depends at what level you are. I think it depends how you apply this stuff. If I've read your paper on this, I thought it was very informative. If you're looking at what are the variables included in sleep apnea, like how many of them are related to actual choking, like the tongue falling back, like what 1 out of 4, right? So I think that if you look at the basic aerodynamics of what happens breathing through the nose, of how much harder it is to make that choking sound when you're breathing slow, when you're breathing low, and if you carry that over to the night, then it makes sense to me that that would possibly, for some people, decrease your symptoms of sleep apnea. So I've said a lot there, but what I'm trying to explain is CPAPs are great. They're absolute lifesavers. Keep using your CPAP. It is not fixing the core problem, and in some ways, it's probably going to make you worse, so that you will always have to be on a CPAP. If you want to look at the core problem, I would start by looking at nasal breathing. I would start there, and then I would work down, not the other way around.
And to do it the way you say, so you're not talking about forcing nasal breathing. What you're saying is this person should start breathing through their nose all the time during wakefulness, during rest, during physical exercise, and they could also wear a nasal dilator. So at least that, based on the Cottle maneuver, if they just prise their nostrils and if that gives them relief, wear a nasal dilator. But also, you talked about the tongue. So ideally, we need to have the tongue resting up in the roof of the mouth, 3/4 against the palate. And I train my tongue to rest up there. Did you train yours? If you were a chronic mouth breather, it's likely, well, if you were a chronic mouth breather, as you were for parts of your life, your tongue was not in the roof of the mouth because it's not possible to have the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. Did you make a conscious awareness of checking in on where your tongue was, and also when you wake up in the morning, do you check in where your tongue is? That's a terrible question, but
no, I hear you. It was a great question. The answer is yes, of course I do, and that was one of the first things that I learned about becoming a better breather, and it starts with how you're eating. That whole thing about, I had never heard this before, that when you swallow, the tongue should be on the roof of your mouth, and you do that. It feels good. You can swallow more powerfully than this swallow. You see how
you should
many
have
kids.
No movement at all here. The only movement you should see is here. No grimacing during the swallow.
So I think that I did that because I started nasal breathing, and I was every single night when I would go to sleep, I would go to sleep with a huge glass of water. Okay, every single night, like probably 16 ounces, 18 ounces of water. And throughout the night, I'd wake up, I'd just be hitting off it the whole time. My mouth was dry the whole time. I was breathing through my mouth 100% of the time whenever I was sleeping. I never snored loudly. I mean, after my 20s, after a night of like some
few beers,
back when I used to do that, you could, that would make you more apt to make more sounds when you were sleeping. But every single night. And so now with my mouth closed, once you learn to do that when you're sleeping, I found, and this could change for other people, that I'm much more apt to do it during waking hours. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm never breathing through my mouth now unless I'm consciously doing it. I'm never unconsciously doing it. Not because I'm such a rad breather, but because I've just trained myself not to do it. And it feels better doing it that way.
And you also mentioned in terms of sleep apnea, so basically it's an upper airway issue. So we spoke about, the soft palate can fall back in against the throat, the tongue, the epiglottis, or the throat itself. And it was interesting. I'd come across a paper by Malhotra back in 2014, or McSherry, and they talked about lung volume and the connection between lung volume and the upper airway dilator muscles, because very often we're taught that the upper airway is the upper airway and the lower airway is the lower airway, and almost that they're two individual airways, but in actual fact they're one, because say, for example, if we have our chronic mouth breather and they're going to be breathing through the night, fast breathing, hard breathing, upper chest breathing, because that's what mouth breathing does, it reduces lung volume and the throat then is more liable to collapse. So to increase lung volume, then we need to recruit the diaphragm. We recruit the diaphragm by actively encouraging breathing low, as you talked about earlier on. And also you spoke about breathing slow, because if you have somebody who's a forceful breather, as air is coming in through the nose or through the mouth, there's going to be an increased negative pressure there, which is going to contribute to airway wall collapse. So there's a few things going on there. I really think we can make a difference with people's sleep. And not think, I've seen enough over the last 24 years. You've seen enough of the people coming in. So what can we encourage then? Easy things that people, whether they're a CPAP user or the normal person. So number one is breathe in and out through the nose. Number two is have the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth. Number three, once you're comfortable with nasal breathing, you said start off with a nap for 15 minutes with your mouth closed. And just check how are you doing with that. And if you really wanted to be sure, do a sleep study and wear the tape during the sleep study. In actual fact, that would be an interesting one, wouldn't it? Do your baseline sleep study with your mouth open and your tongue in a low resting posture, breathing hard and fast, and dry upper airway, increased collapse, and then spend, what would we say, 3 weeks putting what we're talking about into practice here. I would say 3 to 4 weeks. Give it 4 weeks, just, enough of an adaptation period, and then do your sleep study. Would be interesting.
I think that so many people are already tracking their sleep right now. And so what's great is it's so accessible to people, especially people already tracking their sleep. And this is where I've found people get really convinced on this stuff. They don't want to trust how they feel because they're like, oh, placebo effect. There's so many different variables. But they'll trust the data that shows up on their phone the next day, the next morning, when they look at it. And this is the thing that is it blew me away by how not subtle it was, by how obvious and how transformational nasal breathing was for stages of deep sleep, REM. I mean, across the board, the total quality of your sleep is significantly impacted by this. And this is what I've heard from a lot of people where they would hear me on a podcast or, on a YouTube video, and then they'd say, yeah, I thought what you were saying was all bullshit. And then but I track my sleep and I tried it and oh my God, look at the difference. And so I think that you can do a sleep study, and that would be a very easy thing to do. And that would be a scientific way of doing it because people don't want to believe other people's Oura Ring data, or Whoop band data. But you can also, if you're just curious in what it's doing for you about your own life, you can get an O2 ring or so many different wearables that are now cheap and gauge your progress, which is for the people who are really curious of improving their sleep. This is what I suggest they do, is to get these wearables that you can buy off of Amazon or wherever, and introduce one thing a week and see how it is impacting your sleep, right? And then once you get that signal on the thing that is really benefiting you, then you can just go further into it. I've found that even side sleeping for some people, taping something as simple as taping a ping pong ball to a T-shirt so you're not on your back. People have said, I've snored my whole life. I've even had sleep apnea my whole life. And it went to 0, just sleeping on my side. And maybe that's not a permanent solution. You don't want to sleep. But to me, it convinces them. They're like, oh, I can do something so simple, and it can make this big of a difference. So now I'm going to explore getting the head of the bed and tilting it up a bit. I'm going to explore taping my mouth a little bit. So I think you get people on that train, get them fired up about it, as long as they're people who want to apply a little bit of effort to improving their health. And it can really make a huge difference. And sleep is the thing. Luckily, as opposed to 10 years ago, 10 years ago, it was people were showing off how little sleep they were getting. It's I only got 3 hours last night. What'd you get? 4 hours. You're a wimp. But now people are showing off, I got 9 hours last night. I got 10 hours. So I think that news is out. But I don't think you can be a good sleeper unless you have proper breathing during sleep. It's impossible.
Oh, I don't think you can have a healthy life. I think life is miserable if sleep is off.
I agree.
We are miserable, literally. Well, I am anyway. So,
Oh, well, I can't too. Yeah, that's the one thing. As I get older and continue traveling, I can deal with a lot of the other stressors, but like losing a night's sleep just completely wastes me the next day. So it's something that with the limited time I have to sleep on the road, it needs to be quality time. It doesn't matter if it's on an airplane, which I hate to do, but I do way too often. It doesn't matter if it's in a nice hotel room or a crappy hotel room. It's like the quality of sleep is something I focus on, which is why I travel with sleep tape everywhere I go.
totally. Can I talk about sleep tape? I wrote a book in 2003 called Close Your Mouth. And in that, I was using 3M 1-inch micropore tape. And I used it for many, many years. I always felt a bit off, a little bit, especially when it came to kids. And like I was working with 600 clients per year, so this has been my full-time occupation. Initially, the first 6 years, I only worked with people with asthma. And then I worked with asthma and sleep. And then 2010, I started working a lot with anxiety and panic disorder. It was only asthma for the first 6 years. And then it was a combination or a mixture of asthma and sleep issues. And then 2010, I started going into mental health with asthma, with sleep, if you get what I mean. I always felt uneasy about some people wearing tape. And I also felt it with children as well. And then I decided experimenting first with paper tape coming around the mouth, pulling the lips together. And then I started using kinesio tape and altering the glue and making sure that it's suitable for the face. But I think I struck it lucky here, and I would like to get your comments on it. Sleep doctors are not in favor of sleep tape because they see it in obstructive sleep apnea that there's a risk of mouth puffing. So whatever tape this is going to be their rebuttal. But the question then to ask is, well, can we allow the mouth to be closed with a nasal breathing support and to allow mouth puffing? Now, I'm going to demonstrate it to you. I'm going to give you one as well. This is for beards, by the way, James. This is I don't plug products, to be honest with you, but don't see it as a plug. I want to kind of, just to get a sense of it. So we take the backing off the tape because I want to just tease out the practicalities of this. What is mouth puffing? Have you came across it? The doctors give you a rebuttal. And it took me a while to figure out what mouth puffing was, and it's not mouth leak. So mouth leak is when the CPAP is on, but the air is coming in through the nose, but it's coming out through the mouth, so it's not splinting open the airway. Mouth puffing is when the individual, there's a pressure built up that they have to breathe hard and fast, and they just can't get that air out quick enough through their nose. It has to come out through some hole, if I'm crude about it. It's going to be the mouth. So I want to do a demonstration, right? So this is the tape here. I know you've come across it, and it's for beards. Okay, we talked about snoring. Now, here's my thing about snoring. There's mouth snoring and there's no snoring. Mouth snoring is the most common in terms of the palate at the back, and it goes like this. Okay, so I would like you to make that sound of the mouth snore. Okay, so how does it sound? It's very throaty, isn't it? You could differentiate, there's plenty of women, especially, they've recorded their husbands. Their husband isn't saying, he's saying, I'm not snoring, and she's saying, well, I'm going to soon show you. So she records him snoring, she plays it back to him the next day, and it sounds like, very throaty. The mouth is going to be dry, there's trauma to the back of the mouth, etc. Close your mouth and try and snore through your mouth with your mouth closed. That's your no snore.
Snore through my mouth with
Correct.
my mouth snore.
This is a mouth snore. So my question is, can you snore through your mouth if your mouth is closed?
No, of course not.
So can we say then, if we get the mouth closed and the person is breathing exclusively through the nose, that we can stop mouth snoring 100%? That's my take on it.
Mouth snoring, yes.
In other words, to snore through the mouth, you have to breathe through the mouth.
Sure.
So that's logic.
For mouth snoring, some people.
We don't need double-blinded randomized control trial on that, do we?
Snore through their nose, but yeah, for mouth snoring, of course.
Okay, so that's one aspect. So that's the most common form of snoring that we can have to address it. Snoring often coincides with sleep apnea. The next form of snoring is nasal snoring, and it goes like this. So if you make that sound, and it's very distinctive, isn't it? So you have that kind of nasally sound. Now what I would like you to do is to breathe soft through your nose. So take a soft breath of air in through your nose and a slow, relaxed, gentle breath out. In other words, when you soften and slow down and normalize breathing patterns, the respiratory rate comes down and the tidal volume normalizes, minute volume normalizes, so there's less turbulent airflow coming into the nose. Now, we may not get rid of nasal snoring 100% because that's also influenced by the anatomy. So deviated septum, chronic rhinitis, nasal obstruction. Rhinitis, we can help. So that's one thing I want to talk about. Now, mouth puffing. So if you don't mind putting on the tape, or if I'm putting you on the spot.
A little bit. We're here, you know. I've got the tape in front of me.
This is especially for our marketing guys. Somebody has to put it.
Don't you dare. Put a big ad above me.
So you have to stretch it. You have to stretch it about 30% and covering the top here, and then you have the bottom, and it should be at a stretch, and then you have to seal it. But you should feel a tension there pulling it together.
I sure do.
Do you feel a tension?
I do.
So can you puff out through your mouth there? So say, for example, you're heavy breathing during sleep. Okay, so let's do it. It's totally applicable. It's totally possible. So what happens is that if you have somebody with obstructive sleep apnea, and especially if they're more severe, so these are the people, the core that you talked about earlier on. They're more severe OSA, their AHI, the apnea-hypopnea index, probably you're talking about 30 plus.
Mm-hmm.
And with that 50% of that population are likely to mouth puff, but you don't know the population by looking at the person. And that is why when we talk about tape as in the conversation, and given how it's so, like taping is all over the place in social media, and I can understand, see the problem here is that instead of being selective and saying, instead of, say, a sleep doctor becoming curious and talking about what can we do here? What's the good points here? All the things you spoke about. Like, that's not just anecdotal evidence, it's reported evidence, but there's enough in the literature over the years looking at nasal breathing versus mouth breathing and the difference it does to sleep quality, etc. But what a sleep doctor is doing is they're saying exactly what you said. Mouth taping is dangerous. I've heard it was accused of being contributing to asphyxiation. By the way, there's been no recorded ever, despite millions of tapes being used. But instead of being curious and saying, where does it work and what can we do to kind of ensure some safety rails here in terms of mouth puffing, everything else, would that be a logical argument? Like,
of course it is, but again, you're approaching logic with someone that is going to apply an illogical argument to you. You know, everything that you're saying, it like makes sense, right? And if you want to wear this, or if you want to work, may I?
Yeah, of course, okay. Yeah, we'll take it off. I just wanted to do it for the demonstration of the mouth puffing.
Absolutely,
so I did.
And to be clear, you know, about in regards to sleep tape, I've never promoted, and I'm not associated or affiliated with any tape brands or anything like that. And I've gotten a lot of offers, and I've said absolutely not, because it depends on what you're comfortable with. So some of this requires someone to use their own common sense. You know, if something's uncomfortable, then don't do it. So with the tape that I use, it's a very simple tape. I take off some of the adhesive before I put it on. I go like this 3 or 4 times, just so it's really light. At any time, it comes right off. So I would never use a piece of tape that would, if I'm trying to open my mouth, this is not a hostage situation, right? If I'm trying to open my mouth, it needs to come right off. Having said that, you know, you don't want to be the parent that gets busted for taping their kid's mouth at night, even though I know a lot of parents who have done it, and they've claimed like so many benefits. So in that regard, it makes more sense to me to use your MyoTape, you know, and I know a lot of people who use it because it removes that one obstacle of I don't want to tape my, like, what if he vomits, whatever. Still, the tape is going to come right off.
Yes, yeah.
I keep saying that. But nonetheless, that it's an easier transition if that obstacle, that psychological obstacle, because it's not a physical or logical obstacle, it's a psychological, if that's removed, and to have people experiment with that and see how it works for them. So, I mean, the old sleep tape thing, you remember this was a very minor thing a number of years ago. It's very sketchy. People, were criticizing it, and now it's just become a burgeoning cottage industry.
Oh, that's huge.
And I think that some of that is, actually a lot of it is because it just works. It works. It's simple and it works. And people have tried to find all these different ways to extort money from other people for doing it. And you use whatever tape you want. I don't care. But coming down to the core premise of nasal breathing at night, however you figure that out is the right thing.
So the point that we're going to make, both with adults and also with children, again, I'm just thinking about, say, for example, people might be thinking at home, my child is 7 years of age and my child is a chronic mouth breather. So how do I differentiate between if the child is allergic rhinitis, which is causing mouth breathing, or does the child have enlarged adenoids, which is causing mouth breathing, or is it a combination of the two, or is there a habit thrown in as well? So now you have a combination of the three. Like, I do a simple test, and you'll probably be aware of it. Like, we first we have the child come in and we have them put on the paper tape, because, of course, as soon as a 5-year-old does this, they do that. So I have them put on the paper tape. And I just want to check, how comfortable is this child just breathing through the nose, just from the outset? Because if the child even is comfortable breathing through the nose right now, without us having done anything, I know the child is mouth breathing solely because of habit. Okay. So the next point I do is, well, maybe the child is feeling a little bit uncomfortable and I don't want to force the child, but what I do is I have the child do the nose and blocking exercise. And we know that if you hold your breath, and again, this is going back to 1923, it showed if you hold your breath, it decreases nasal resistance, it increases nasal volume. So it's easier to breathe through your nose. If the child can breathe easier through their nose as a result of doing 6 repetitions of that, we know that rhinitis is a significant contribution. Because I know it's not going to work so quickly with enlarged adenoids. So now we have the child. Can the child sit comfortably with their mouth closed for 3 minutes? And then I normally get them doing the steps exercise, which is Buteyko. And that's simply the child breathing in and out, holding the nose, and walking, say, we start off with 10 paces, then 15, then 20, then 25, 30. Just build it up. And pushing them to a point at which it gets uncomfortable, but nothing maximum, nothing extreme. And then I say, can the child walk with their mouth closed? And can the child jog with their mouth closed? Now, that's a test that I would say to any parent, that if you're unsure, and I can understand your hesitancy in terms of encouraging your child to breathe in and out through the nose, but I would genuinely say, if a child is able to jog with their mouth closed, that child's nose is working pretty okay with them.
Yeah.
So there's simple things that we can do, to kind of allay concerns, just as you spoke about. So then this isn't, in terms of mouth taping, it should be done, but it should be done with some degree of understanding in terms of comfort. Can the person breathe through the nose? And safety has to be taken into consideration.
Should be done with common sense.
Common sense. That's exactly what I want.
With those 3 bullet points
Yes.
right underneath it. But common sense, you're asking people to use basic common sense. And if you don't want to apply common sense to this is not a good fit for you. Right? So
I'm intrigued in terms of, and I'm not sure how long we'll be talking for in terms of...
Go all night, man. We're just getting going. Bring this crew over to dinner afterwards and see what happens.
I'm kind of intrigued. We spoke about breathing, but I'd like to get an insight into Mr. James Nestor. Life pushes us. And even though we do something that I feel that you absolutely love, your work as a journalist, it comes through, and as a writer and as a researcher, and in pulling that book together, it's totally a work of art. I say that because I find it very easy to read from cover to cover, and for the words to land like that, something comes through in the pages. So you love what you do. which I'm sure you're grateful for. Is there ever a time that you feel that it gets unmanageable in terms of the workload? Is it ever a time that you feel, I'm so lucky on one hand, but I'm absolutely pulled in all directions on the other hand? I don't know, is it just me?
Every minute of every day, I feel like that.
Right.
I'd love to say I'm being sarcastic, but the last year has been really difficult on the work front, because what I thought I was going to be closed and done with, and what I thought was going to be starting after a nice pregnant pause of 3 months to catch my breath, never happened. The thing that I thought was going to be done with ended up taking so much longer. So now it's bled into the other thing that I'm starting, and it's been absolutely chaotic, not in a good way. So I'm looking forward to when things calm down some. I know that just like with you and with a lot of other authors, people that are in this space, it's never a flat line. A lot of people work a job that is a flat line, and then you make incremental progress up. With my work, it's these huge crests, these huge waves of busy, 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 and then internal work, and then external, like exposure, then I fade away. And I've noticed as I get older, I'm looking forward to those times where that wave is coming down, so I'm able to go into the introverted internal work part. I love writing books. I love researching them. I love doing interviews. I love plotting the whole thing out. It's a world that you create and you immerse yourself in, and I don't want to leave it. But the unfortunate thing is I have to leave it every single day, and I have to leave it, and it's usually jarring emails, just a bunch of garbage that's going. It's just the noise of life, right, that I've become more sensitive to than I was before, because it's so precious, that time I have to work on the thing that I love to do. And so I have to snap out of that, and then in the morning I have to somehow find a way to snap back into it without being disturbed. And my life was simpler when I wrote this book and when I wrote the previous book, and now it's more complicated. So that time of deep internal work energizes me more than anything else. And it's the thing that I'm trying to find a way of getting more of, because I'm following my heart and where my energy wants to go. However, having said that, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to speak with people and to go out and do this thing and that thing on stage as well. And I love that. But they should come, in my opinion, at different seasons. To do them both is very challenging. I know this sounds so quaint and idiotic compared to someone who has a real job doing real hard work, but in my mind,
no, it's a different pressure, though. It's
a different
getting
pressure,
up on stage
but
is
I'm hearing,
a buzz.
I'm
but
hearing myself. I'm just like,
no, James, God Almighty,
dude.
The pressure to get up on stage to deliver. Yeah, okay.
Someone that's digging a ditch all day, like
yeah,
in
that's
the
tough.
rain. Those are different seasons, like winter and summer.
It's a different toughness, though.
But I have found, and this is probably just me becoming too sensitive to stuff, that if I can stay in that external world of like going out and doing, I'm perfectly happy to stay in that, right? But combining both of these is problematic for me, and I've been under a lot of pressure, because all I want to do is slip away.
I get it.
To finish the thing. But if you spend too much time in that world, then it gets extremely lonely. And then you can't wait to go out on the road and meet people again and have interesting conversations. I've just noticed I'm never, ever going to get in this position again, because there's the undercurrent that's constantly, and then there's the exposure part that's going, and they don't mix well. This is an oil and water situation. So once I close this new book, which will probably happen in next 3-4 months, then things are going to be very different. Then the pressure will be able to go away. But all I want to do before then is to be left alone and just go into this world and make it right. because I've been working on this book for 5 years or so, and it's where my entire head is. And so it's interesting talking about breathing and this research, which I'm still, as you can see, very excited to talk about, but it's also switching gears in this major way when you're spending 9 hours a day in one world, and you have to go back and be like, oh yeah, I remember I did that way back when.
When you get up of a morning, say for example, you get up at 7 or 8 o'clock, and that morning you know that you have no commitments. You don't have to answer emails that day. You don't have to have any Zoom calls. You don't have to meet with people like me to do podcasts. That day you know that you have 8 or 9 hours of free. Do you find there's a difference in terms of the quality of writing? Just a psychological thing that you know that the day is cleared versus another day.
I have never had that. So unfortunately, I used to have that. I used to have like when you're writing a book, you by nature become very self-centered. You have to fall into the thing, and a lot of people around you don't understand. They're just like, well, don't you want to go on the weekend and go do this? I said, all I want to do is be left alone to write this book. So you have to also manage that. You have to manage family, friends, emotions, psychology, biology, all those things have to be managed in it. So I cannot remember the last time where I was like, oh, it's Sunday, I'm just going to wake up and, read the paper or do something. It's last few years have been constantly going, and it's starting to wear me down a little bit. Yeah.
So there's a couple of points to it, though. You know breathing, you know strategies to upregulate, downregulate, you know strategies to improve your sleep. You also direct your attention out of your head, I'm sure, into your body, onto your breath, to bring a quietness to the mind. So you've got a pretty good resilience, I'm sure, because of those strategies. But can that be also a negative to that you will take on a lot of stuff?
You're absolutely right. And there is no way I would be able to do what I've been doing the last few years without these techniques to lean back on. Impossible without techniques to calm my body down so I can actually sleep even though I'm wildly jet lagged. Techniques to calm my nerves down before I speak at a big event, or techniques to get my energy up so I can actually get up in the morning and entertain people or write or whatever. So I think without those, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. Having said that, it's also in some ways a detriment because it's giving you this extra volume, this extra energy, this extra capacity to do more. And from someone who has never been in the situation, I've been in the last 5 years promoting this is a dream. And so given this opportunity, I'm going to take every single opportunity because I know it's going to fizzle away, right? And so I've said yes to everything. And now that was fine for the first 3 years. First 4 years, it was okay. First 5 years, marginal. 6 years is too much. So I'm really trying to find a better balance. But to answer your question, without having this back pocket of these different therapies, and not just breathing, but therapies on nutrition, other aspects of health, there's no way I'd be able to do what I was doing at this stage of my life. But now my focus definitely for the next year is to find a better balance and to exhale a little more, figuratively and literally, and to try to just bring more simplicity to the situation. The problem is with that is all the stuff I'm working on is extremely exciting to me. These are dreams that have taken a very long time to put together, a documentary series where I'll be able to finally go around the world and capture some of these stories and present them in a different way is something I've been working on for years and years, and now it's finally come to fruition, right? It's happening. But we're filming as I'm closing a new book. So how do you get your head in these two different places? Also a bunch of other really fun, unique opportunities that are on paper are absolute dream. I just need less of it. Just like people need to breathe less. I need less volume and more silence in my life, and that's what I'm shooting for in the future.
It's very easy to fall into the trap and I think on one hand, because you have that ability to take on a lot, you do. And the tools that you've applied has give you some ability to take on so much that in comparison to somebody who is not able to take on, they reach their limits. But also a person who has the tools to take on a lot, they also reach their limits. So we all reach our limits. And it's a strange one, isn't it, though? Because you would think that, you know, everything is so much faster. We can get so much more done with emails, with everything else. But the problem is now our workload has just increased enormously. And it's crazy. Like you were talking about, like I was trying to get my head around, and then I was reading this book called Attention Span by Gloria Marx. And in that she talked about, in terms of if there's so many plates spinning in the air, and if you've got so many projects going on, and the problem is that if they're unfinished, so there's 10 different things going on, 10 different unfinished projects. So even though when you put 9 aside and you're focusing on one here, there's the residual tension because the 9 are still unfinished, and you can't get away from it. So your plan is to, if we were to reverse engineer this, what is your perfect work week next year?
I would have learned to say no. I mean that, I'm starting to this year. I'm starting to say just no to everything because I'm at the feel like I've reached a maximum, and I want to spend my life doing deep creative work. This is where I am the most happy, the most relaxed, and to be able to create these different worlds. And you know, I'm closing in on a book. I love writing books. I'm excited about this book, but I have to make sure it's right before it ships off. So there's a lot of pressure on me that I put on myself to make sure it's just perfect in the way that I want it to be. And you know, the documentary series, we're going to make sure it's good, you know, that it's different, that it's going to help people. So I think that the combination of those things is the problem. It's not those things individually. And I'm going to make absolute sure that when I start a new book, because I have 6 different ideas for books, that I'm going to allow myself the luxury of just working 10 hours a day, you know, on one thing, and to be more present in it rather than dealing with all of the noise, trying to balance all of the noise, and that analogy of those half-finished projects. I hate that. I can't stand it. Like, I need to close things out, and I get a lot of satisfaction when something's done and it's done right and it's taken off the shelf. So I will work myself sick until that happens, and I need to learn how to bring that down a little bit.
And your perfect work week. I've been hemming and hawing. I'd love to go down to a 3-day week. So I'm thinking about similar things as yourself. And what is it? What is it? You talked about, okay, working 8 hours, 10 days, that doesn't bother you. You're talking about working 5 days a week. Do you ever feel a time that, do you think it's strange that we as human beings, that we wake up of a Monday morning and we literally work right until Friday evening and into Saturday, and Sunday is really just, Sunday isn't downtime, because Sunday is just to give us some respite so that we can go into work on Monday. Do you think it's kind of strange? Is it a bit crazy?
I work through weekends, so I'm not taking any days off because I need to like close this thing down. But the difference is, I think that you say, what's your dream week? I love what I'm doing. So I absolutely love it. It's just the volume of this stuff. It's too many things. Yeah. So my dream week would be able to work on this stuff every single day of the week, but not for 10 hours a day. Yes. And to have the noise gone. I'm trying to find a way of getting off of email. I was like, if I'm able to hire someone, man, I'd pay them a lot of money to deal with all of the noise so I can just be left alone. That would be the best use of funds I can imagine. So to answer your question, I'm not trying to do less work. I'm trying to be left alone to do deeper work.
Sure, get it. Yeah. It was Dan Martell. He talks about buy back your time. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've come across it. Not so easy to implement, though. Emails are kind of personal, because even if you have somebody answering your emails, it's going to come back to you. I don't know. I
think that there's ways of there's ways of doing it. It's better than it was, but it's still not good enough, you know, because I have a lot of personal relationships with people all over the place that I want to hear from, I want to interact with. So I think that there is the expectation when someone writes you that you have to write back within the next couple of hours, but I'm starting to delay that by a few days and figure out, I might just put AI on that and respond to me and just see what happens, you know, for a while.
Your new docu-series, are you able to talk about that? Is it under wraps?
Sure.
I'm
let's
intrigued.
talk about that.
So let's untangle that one.
So my, I've been talking about this stuff for a long time and spoken on a lot of podcasts, done a Maestro series, like done a bunch of stuff. Still, everywhere I go, where I speak, people say, how do I reduce the symptoms of asthma? I'm like, well, it's in the book. It's on every podcast. They're like, yeah, but can you just tell me real quick? Or my kid has sleep apnea. What do I do? Or, I want to exercise at a higher level. How specifically should I be breathing? So I realized I love reading books. I love researching from books. A lot of people don't read books, or if they do, it's very superficially. Even though every single thing is in that book.
Or at least just go back
and there's even an appendix
at the end
that
of the
says,
book.
do this. Still not enough. People are visual learners. So we had the opportunity, the book has been optioned quite a few times to do a documentary about it, but none of it was the right fit. They were just going to water it down until it meant nothing. So now we're up and running in pre-production on doing a 3-part series that will have about a 40-minute episode, 3 of those in each section. And then at the end of these episodes will be modules taught by leaders in the field of exactly what to do and how to do it. So you'd be able to have this and refer to it at any time. There's the entertainment part of it that explains the why and the how and takes you on the adventure and gets you interested in it. And then there's the actionable part of it, which delivers not like 3-hour-long podcasts or anything, but just do exactly this. And we're not going to only tell you, we're going to show you. And we're not going to give you any story because the story was already told in this episode. We're just going to tell you what to do. Do this and do it this way and do it now. And so that's the approach and if this doesn't work, I give up. This is the last thing I'm doing in breathing. Everyone's like, oh, the next book's on breathing, right? It's called Breathe Deeper, Breathe Lighter. It's not about breathing at all. This is my one book on breathing, but I didn't intend on doing this, but it seems like the need is really there. And if we want to start turning this dial to have, for instance, a doctor say hey, your kid has asthma. Well, what do I do? Look at these modules. They're available for free. Offer a contribution if it's of value, and just follow these modules because they're all science-based and they're taught by leaders in the field, and they're going to tell you how to fix it. And you can learn the why and the how of this with a 40-minute episode that precedes it. So that's the plan that is now sitting on top of me closing this book, writing a script.
And in terms of the 3 series, are you going to isolate them? So you talked about one child as a child with asthma. Maybe you have one for children, or it's hard. How do you break that down in terms of? There's so many different ways you can go here. I don't know if you're able to give away the secrets to how it's unfolding, but have you looked at different, not necessarily different breathing techniques, but you're looking at different issues? Here's a child who's mouth breathing. This is all about kids. Breathing exercises for children. Here's an adult with sleep disorder breathing, insomnia, snoring, obstructive sleep apnea, mental health over here. Is that the way you've done it, or it's totally different?
That is the wireframe of what we're working within. And right now we're starting to flesh this all out. And if only I was having dinner after this podcast with the world expert in breathing. Oh, it turns out I am. So I will be asking you a few.
My head, I won't be able to get out of the room, James, after that one.
We'll talk all about it at dinner. But to the short version is that's exactly how. So it's pointed therapies for each of these things. Like these little modules. They, as you know, they don't have to be long.
Well, totally.
It's do this. We're going to tell you exactly how to do it. You set your phone this way. Put your phone on your bedstand this way. Buy this device. Do this, 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 and this. And if that's not going to work for people, then that's it. That's my last. The door will be closed on the breathing stuff. But I feel that this thing will be distributed for free for everyone, everywhere. And the only way that we're going to be able to keep it going is asking for a contribution. If it was of value to you, then you can contribute a little bit of cash.
That's amazing.
And then we can take that and continue to do it. This is a total risk. I've taken out loans from a lot of people to do this, but I have faith. They're like, "Are you sure this is going to work?" I said, "Of course it's going to work. I have no idea." But I have faith that I think when people see this and they experience it, we're not asking for people to contribute $1,000 or whatever. It's just like offer contribution. I have faith that this model will be able to get around the world in 20 different languages and affect people in a real way with actionable steps that anyone can do anywhere for free. And this is something I've thought about for a long time. This is something that I thought if this resource was available, then people really wouldn't have any excuse to be like, "Oh, I can't do that." It's just there. It's clear. It's available all over.
I think it's amazing because ultimately, okay, I could be thinking one way, well, my career is under threat, or I can be thinking another way. There are literally billions of people out there who need help, and no single breathing instructor is going to reach it. We've been banging this door for the last 25 years, even looking at a science-based approach for breathing. We know the application of it. We know how useful it can be for helping various conditions. And the most common ones, we're talking about respiratory health, we're talking about sleep health, we're talking about mental health. Now, even if you were to look, I won't even talk about sleep industry, you've spoken enough about that, but the mental health industry, if we were doing, I'm not going to say we, if there was a good job and mental health was a success, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in now. And mental health issues are just through the roof, and especially with younger kids and teenagers. So I'm sure part of that docuseries, you're really focusing in on that angle of it in terms of getting that reach. I think it's brilliant. I think it's great.
It's exactly what we're going to do. And we're not going to answer all of their questions, right?
Sure.
The key is, just as I mentioned before, is to open that door for them and to provide them where start here. And if you can do this, you're going to be 70, 80% there. And then if you want to learn more, then you can go deeper into all of these other layers. But I haven't seen a central place where people can go to find the real stuff, right? What do you refer people to if they just want to find some information real quick for these 12 different maladies that they're suffering for that are related to breathing? So that's kind of what we're going to hope to do, and we're going to see how it works, because I think if you're able to get this out in countries where people can't contribute, but they can still watch it for free. Totally. Some kid in Bangladesh or whatever who's suffering from asthma or chronic rhinitis, or has even, you could go as far as is starting to develop some curvature of the spine. If you tell them about proper posture, proper breathing, you could absolutely affect this person's life. So that is the only way that when I was thinking about it, to distribute this in a way that is truly global. It's not behind a paywall of Netflix or HBO or whatever. It's available for everyone.
That's amazing. So this idea come into your mind, and when do you expect it to launch?
Hopefully spring of next year, 2027. That's what we're hoping for. We're shooting it in October, November.
Oh, we'll be behind it. So we'll be putting it out. And I think every breathing instructor will put it out, because it'll absolutely put it out there in a way that's going to lift, it's a rising tide lifts all boats. So, and I think the awareness, it's morally it makes sense, economically it makes sense, socially it makes sense.
It might not.
Well, it does in a way, because if you think of the healthcare costs with all of these different issues, if you think of the healthcare costs in mental health, respiratory health, the BBC did a documentary on the Buteyko method back in 1998 called Breathless. And they interviewed a doctor from Scotland, a doctor called Gerald Spence. And his asthma budget, I'm sure you've seen the documentary, his asthma budget at that time was £15,000 for his cohort of patients. And after teaching the Buteyko method, he reduced it to £5,000. So, it's just, and you'd wonder why, and that's why probably you can hear there's a sense of frustration coming into my voice. And that's why we really need something like this to drive it out there, to get it out there. So there's a place in breathing. There's a future there. Are you excited about the future? Do you think AI is going to threaten it? Have you thought about, breathing instructors? Do you think I have a career that can I keep teaching this for next
I think
30 years?
You have one of the careers that is actually safe. Okay, everyone else I'm hosed. But I think no, it's inspiring to see what has happened so far with at least the interest in better breathing and the explosion of breath work. I know you hate that word, but to me, if you have turned people on to this stuff, even on a superficial level by just making them high for 20 minutes, that's a plus. It's a gain because they weren't in that position, didn't have that experience before. And then they can go deeper into what proper breathing is the rest of the time. So I actually do think that the future is bright with breathing. And I think especially from the aspect of dentistry, what is happening with all of this movement in airway-focused dentists. A lot of dentists are losing business because to mail-order businesses that straighten your teeth with Invisalign, So this is both a benefit to them economically, but I think morally it's even more beneficial in which they can provide preventative maintenance for their patients to not only have better oral health, but to have better overall health. And so everyone wins with that. So I am continually inspired about this stuff, which is why I keep talking about it, which is why I was excited to come down here and do this jam again.
This jam we did 6 years ago, and the conversation was different this time around, and I wanted to kind of make it different. 6 years, it's quite a long time in that space. And it's amazing, really, where it's gone in terms of the awareness of breathing. Is there any changes that need to happen? Is there anything that's kind of irritating you in terms of, we'd say, the breathing world? Where are we going with this?
I think the changes are happening. I think the changes are happening organically outside of the larger system, which is what needed to happen. Just like the wellness industry is happening almost entirely outside of the medical system. It just is. And it's growing to become this multi-billion-dollar industry because people are still sick after they go to their doctors too often. There are great doctors out there. I'm not begging on doctors in my family. I'm very good friends with a bunch of doctors. I'm saying they are limited in what they can do. So I think that right now people are able to get information from bunch of different sources that they weren't able to get information from. Not everyone likes to go to medical libraries and look up old articles. I know you do. I know I do. But people are able to listen to a podcast or they're able to read something online that will pique some interest and show them a different way into their health problem that they've been suffering from. And this is the first time in all of humanity that we've had such immediate access to so much information. So I think it's extremely inspiring, and it's allowing people to make better choices.
And in terms of the breathing industry itself, inside the industry, us as instructors, is there a particular way you think it's going to go? Do you think, have you ever considered, because it seems to be, I'm sure from a person looking in, a listener looking in, especially if they're new to breathing, they must think it's a bit of a minefield. Is there anything that needs to happen within the industry itself? Is there anything that we need to be doing as breathing instructors?
No, it'll sort itself out. I don't think there's any parameters. I don't think there's anything you can consciously do to this. The people who are providing quality, who are showing that their clients are benefiting time and time again, these are the people, not only will they survive, these are the people that are going to go to the top. And what happens is it takes those people providing real quality that are less inspired by constantly doing social media. It takes them longer to get up, but once they do, they take over everything. And the people that are very flashy, who have these huge budgets for social media, but have very little knowledge or very little interest in helping people, they will go up very quickly, okay? They will get very popular, and they will go down just as quickly. So it's a long game. And I'm seeing this happen all over the place. There's already people that have gone up and gone down. Now they're on to other things. They're like, oh, breathing's old stuff. I'm into ice plunging. Like, oh, that's old stuff. I'm into peptides now. So that's how it's always been, and that's how it will always be. So I think you just follow your gut, you follow your ethics, and you try to benefit people in the best way possible by providing real value and actionable items they can take to benefit their health, and you can be around a long time.
What do you think has to happen? So you talked about your docuseries in terms of generating awareness. I'm sure you've talked about the education system, and you think of children and teenagers in school, and they're doing various subjects such as geography, history, maths, English, Irish in Ireland, of course. Should there be a breathing class in there? Should there be a class on training these children to be able to direct their attention, to differentiate between thoughts that are useful and thoughts that are not useful, to be able to self-regulate, to be able to sleep? Do you think that should be? Do you think that's the future of our education system? One class, James, one class per week.
No, it's never going to happen.
No,
it's great. It's so, but along with that, there should be instruction on how to eat better, right? There should be instruction on how to exercise better and the importance of exercise. These are such simple things. And the idea that school districts are then going to adopt these, I just think it's impossible. If you look at the food in the
canteens,
in the schools in the U.S., 70-80% of it is corn and wheat. I mean, this is just absolutely. I'm going to have a Pepsi with a pizza, and this is my lunch that you're feeding an 8-year-old. Sounds delicious, but it's not good for an 8-year-old. So I don't have faith in school systems in improving this stuff. I'm not bagging on teachers. I know that they have a lot on their plates right now. But I think it really comes down to the individuals. I think it comes down to the families to take control of your own health. And now we have resources to do that. So I think that that's their responsibility. It would be wonderful to have all these different things. I wouldn't wait for that to happen.
Well, surely education is about training the mind and training the brain, and we can't expect a child to do well academically. I'll talk about a kid. I left school initially at 14 years of age, never to go back. I went back 1 year later. So I know what it's like to be that child sitting in school, looking at the teacher, but my attention stuck in my head. We all have our own stories. And I felt that the education system failed me. I got through the education system. I was driven. I got into university, got my degree. It could have been a lot easier. I think there's a lot of kids that are going to fall between the cracks. I think there's a lot of kids that don't reach their full potential. And yes, nutrition plays a role. Sleep is a bigger one, I think. And breathing and sleep go together. And the mind, when we bring breathing and sleep and the mind together, there's 3 very, very important inroads into that child reaching their full potential. Because I don't think the child is going to reach their full potential with poor sleep, with poor breathing, and with a poor state of mind. And it's not just that the child, things will be difficult for that child, but things will be difficult for everybody around that child. And it's not just isolated to childhood. We're talking about lifelong. So, yeah. Anyway.
Once again, at the close of this interview, you are approaching something with
the impossible.
pure logic to an illogical system. If schools were run on pure logic, using reason and science and data, we'd be in a very different situation than we're in now. Hopefully that will be the future. Everything's getting shaken up with new technologies, so I can only hope that these technologies will be applied to actually make kids resilient and better able to be more dynamic in the future than a lot of the education I received, which was learning how to spell state capitals. don't know if that's going to be super helpful in the future, but breathing should be a part of that. Let's hope for the best and see what happens.
So drawing it to a close, or is that your closure?
I don't know. Where else are we going?
I think
now?
we've had a great conversation, I have to say. I really enjoyed it. And we've covered so many different angles, and talking is exhausting as well. And I'm sure the carbon dioxide levels in this room is through the roof. So, but at the same time, I think thanks very much for your time, given that I've pulled you away from so many things going on and so many plates spinning. I get it. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, let's stay in touch, James. And final word is yours.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, yours was the first interview I did, and it could be the last or one of the last to do with this book. So we have bookended this whole breathing adventure with interviews with Patrick McKeown.
And the Brett. I need you to sign that for me. Thank you very much, James.
I can do that. Thank you.
Great.